Hey, Eric, how goes it?
Good morning. Pretty good. How's it going with you?
Good, good. Busy, busy client work happening with some exciting milestones for them, which is really cool to be a part of. So getting results for companies that are doing good for Canadians.
Excellent.
How about you? What's happening on your end? What's keeping you busy?
I'm working on uh, basically some architecture for a couple projects.
Okay. Morning, Peter.
Morning, Peter. Uh, just trying to, at a high level, um, work out some of the things on the strategic communications and on the decision support side. We were talking about some policy development AI related stuff. Got into a big conversation in regards to the use of AI versus how we could use, I don't know if the terminology is the best with this, but including sycophancy in chatbots it makes better response depending on how much sycophancy you actually include. And so if you're using that in a political policy development I think that has some interesting potential. And I'm just looking at seeing if we can do some stuff uh, to basically fund a project that basically builds the community, develops policy development, and uses these chatbots to make it more efficient with a much tighter timeline for policy development. So instead of years, we're trying to basically bake it down to like months.
Huh.
And I'm trying to target it for large scale uh, regional and national movements is what I'd really like. I think we talked about strategic communications and disinformation and stuff like that.
Yes.
This is an offshoot of that, and seeing if I can actually get enough support for it to actually push this forward. Because we had some conversations with my spouse, and they're in AI and AI ethics, and we got into a whole conversation about, well, what's possible, what's prudent, and all of those issues.
hmm
And so we're just trying to rough out some ideas to see if there's any support for this type of a thing.
there's a solution out there that could get you what you're looking for. I'll put it in the chat. KarmaFlow.ai is the company's name, and
Mm-hmm.
I work with them and have clients that work with them because of what they do, and it's pretty cool. They've got the bots, PhD level communications, whether it's phone, text, um, so voice, text, and is able to housed on a CRM consolidate the communications, do background analysis, and show the trends. It does a lot. Check them out, and I can make introductions if that's something that would help.
Yeah, well, it looks, I'll check them out. One of the biggest things that one of the biggest problems that I've been looking at is most of the community platforms are
hmm
closed, and the data access is an issue because, of course, policy issues. And as people are developing the policy, you want a closed system,
hmm
password protected, or some sort of method. And so there's a few interesting packages out there that work the community side, but I haven't seen a lot on the policy side. And like I said, we if you have too much sycophancy then it falls apart. If you have, but we're especially in politics, the prestige is a big piece, and so if you can mimic that at an acceptable level, it can keep things flowing. So we'll see how it works.
Can you give me an example of this? So a scenario and how this could help, or what you're proposing could help get the results that you're seeking.
Well, whether we're talking nationally or provincially, um, policy development is typically on a annual to even multi-year process. And it tends to be very divisive because we generally follow what is it? I can't remember the name of it, but in general, public choice theory, right? So we have special interest groups, and it's about the special interest group getting their way, and that generally ends up being very divisive. So what we really want is we want something that becomes more inclusive and basically mediates the dialogue and also moves that dialogue along much faster. So your decision loop or your OODA loop, instead of it being a year or 2 years, you want to shrink that down to I would ideally like to see it 3 months. You put that in a mediated blended environment so that you're not having to move. And because in a lot of cases, you have a provincial dialogue or a federal dialogue, you bring maybe 1% of your membership together for an in person meeting, you vote on your policies, that type of stuff. It's not very efficient. And it also basically, if 1% is deciding, that means 99% aren't engaged. And it makes it a much more divisive process. So, so by changing the process, decreasing the size, but reaching out so that you can actually, instead of getting 1%, you're probably trying for 60, 70% engagement. Increase engagement means that you're going to have hopefully you have a better process with increased engagement.
And
So
this is
that's the argument for it.
so Karma Flow is implemented for an organization in Ontario I worked with called Oasis, that is central um, nonprofit advocate for, if I remember, they work with the four categories of the over 200 um, developmental service agencies that it supports, were grouped by developmental disabilities, housing, and two others I can't remember. But their intent was exactly what you said, to better represent the needs of underrepresented segments of society, where the input and feedback for each of the member organizations. Now that data is being collected internally, and the Karma Flow solution parses through, is able to identify and align messaging, because when you've got politicians and their staffers going around collecting or meeting with these organizations, they're getting different messaging from the same segments. So this helps identify what the challenges are, the priorities, and then unify messaging going out to politicians based on the data, so that you're not communicating 200 different priorities, but you're able to synthesize it to what the main issues are and get clear communications to the politicians, so that that helps shape the policy and get results faster, as opposed to, like you said, the squeaky wheels, which I've experienced. What came to mind was doing a bridge replacement project in Ottawa across the Ottawa River between Ottawa and Gatineau. And my budget allowed for only, you know, unlimited wants, limited means to have one pedestrian and bike lane. And in the end, the cycling interest groups were very vocal, and then we had to find money to be able to create lanes on both sides of the bridge and widen the deck, which added a significant add to the budget. But whether it's First Nations, this is an ongoing issue in every challenge. So I think these guys, it's an effective way to align people and get data to make the right decisions as opposed to just that 1%.
Yep. Yep. So did we have uh, anything particular that we wanted to discuss today?
I sure did. First, I just want to check out Peter. How's Peter doing?
Yeah. Still in Calgary,
Okay.
living the dream, meeting the people, seeing the community. It's nice here. You got to spend a bit of time here to kind of uncover the gems. But
Yeah.
I'm slowly kind of seeing if I was going to recommend a place in Canada for somebody under 35 to move, I would say Calgary is dead on. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's affordable, it's easy. Like when I think about Toronto's, you're competing with physical space in Toronto all the time, whereas here people seem to be more relaxed. So yeah, no, it's been good. I feel more Canadian every time I discover a new city.
That's awesome. That's awesome that
That's
you're
good. Yeah.
going across the country and
Yeah. Well,
getting.
and it's fun because, I meet the movers and shakers and, you know, everybody's kind of holding their nose on, the economy and what's going on, but
Yeah.
it's interesting, to throw solutions out and kind of see how people react to them. So that's been good. But for me, what I was really interested, Eric, is kind of hearing your views on technology readiness levels, because, that's something that I've been slowly learning about and trying to kind of figure out how to navigate around them when the tech transfer offices are upholding the desire to generate income for the school. So yeah, so I'd love to hear your opinion on that. Otherwise,
This,
I'm
that's
sure.
exactly the conversation I wanted to have. Where overall discussion around that, what Peter said, and then who, what would be beneficial in terms of creating solutions to now go out and help the companies at what level, as an incubator, as an accelerator, as a venture studio, what is most needed and what is most practical as an advisory service.
Can you frame that in context of like what is the end result that you're looking for? Are you looking for a viable business
Yeah, yeah.
and getting
Like
this technology out? Or, okay.
exactly
So,
the conversations we've had in terms of, say, focus on dual use companies, the increase in defense investments ramping up from 1.4 to 2% next year to 5% by 2035. Who needs that support the most? And as a viable company, creating those solutions to maybe even take not just fees, equity, to be able to create a fund and be that catalyst for what's lacking in this country.
okay. So from a technical TRLs, um, like when they were developed by NASA, I think it was a great stride forward. But when you look at commercialization, TRLs, well, they're really a staged waterfall type of an approach. And it doesn't really mimic or doesn't really support what we need for commercialization or diffusion of a technology or an innovation. Because if we look at how, from a sociological point of view, how technology gets changed, modified, and adopted. Like we have a hypothesis, we put it forward, and then we implement it in at a small level and see if the reality is actually what we think it is. And it's always going to get modified, and it gets modified by your users, gets modified by your problem, gets modified by the amount of money you have. All of those things come into play. So having a simple staged gate that you have with the TRL, I think there are better ways now. That being said, I also recognize that from a established, this is how the buyers perceive it. So it's not as effective as we need, but it's what the people who have the budget are used to. So how effective is it to change them to something that's more useful? So sure, there's a consulting market there. Being more useful, being more effective is a good thing, especially if you're in a bind, and we are. So the faster we move to something more effective, which it goes beyond TRLs, I think is a good thing. Now, how does that fit into accelerators or venture studios or those types of things? I've said before that I think a venture studio is the most human and capital efficient, because let's face it, from an investor or from a VC point of view, we're searching for the unicorn. But the reality is, can we really afford, do we have the resources to create unicorns? Because that sucks so much economic base out of your market that it's really not that practical. So I would argue that we're looking for the wrong things if we're looking for unicorns in Canada. What we're really looking for are pony, centaurs, and unicorns. You familiar with that jargon?
I'm not.
So ponies, I think, are under 10 million. Centaurs are the mid-range, or like 10 million to 100 million, or up to a unicorn, and a unicorn is a billion and over. So if you look at the amount of economic resources you need to create ponies and centaurs, those early stage and or the small size and medium sized companies, those are really the ones that you want to do in Canada. And once you have a centaur, then you're going to actually push it over into a larger market to create it into a unicorn. Unless you're just trying to sell, like I'm a big on. Well, yeah, you go through the stages and you make it economical. You make it you're getting a decent return on your money. The premise of, well, yeah, I'm just going to raise $1 billion and I don't care whether I'm making money or not because I have the $1 billion. That's not me, and I don't think that's effective. That's where you get the frauds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm more about how do you get that company into the right business model so it's generating the right amount of money, and then you scale it. That's the ponies and the centaurs. And if you can create those effectively and quickly, that's really what you want. And from a capital and human resource point of view, so it's not just about money, it's also about the people. And there's nothing quite as devastating. Like you guys have both been on zombie projects, right? That just keep on funding, but you never get anything. You never really are successful. You're just justifying your existence.
Mm-hmm.
And those are terrible, especially for young people. Sure, it pays the bills, but it's not a good human development experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm much more about how can we do this efficiency? So with the human capital and the economic capital, from what I've seen so far, the venture studios are the winner for me. However, that does not change the fact that it's a difficult job. So difficult, but I think it's rewarding.
So knowing all that and agreeing with that in principle, why do you think we keep government, why do we keep funding venture capital and entrepreneurial support in Canada knowing that we're not competitive?
Change, resistance to change.
Right.
Change is hard, change is uncomfortable, and especially if you have to be accountable.
Yeah. And
Um,
what about the IP, like the Canadian Innovation Council has lobbied IP for a couple of years now. They've got huge government funding in the last budget. Like I'm confused because to me, I don't understand how you protect IP within a venture capital funded enterprise that's being put on the auction block internationally. Like foreign interest buys the company, wouldn't they lose the IP? Like, how do you keep the IP secure in Canada if the company's owned by a multinational?
Remember when I was talking about Mondragon versus the what is it, the Keiretsu models? Well, if you have any foreign, if you have any model which allows the IP, which allows for the sale of the company, you're going to lose the IP. So I agree with you. The only way to do that is to be able to make it so that it's distributed enough that you can't shift the network, and things like a worker cooperative with you got 80,000 people in a province, for instance. Let's say you create this and you get 80,000 people in a province. But you're not going to be able to sell, you're not going to be able to convince those 80,000 people to up and move because somebody comes in with $1 billion. They're just not going to want to, right? And so I would argue that the way for Canadians to do it is to creating the network so that you're getting what you need at home and you don't have to move. Why do we generally have to move? Because we don't have enough money. We don't have enough capital, right?
So why do you think a group like Canadian Innovators is working so hard to get government funded IP programs? Like I guess they're just looking for the economic lift, not the social.
They haven't, and I've done their courses. I've got their certification. I've been involved with them. I've listened to a number of the things that they said, and I agree that IP is the way, but they haven't taken the next step, which is exactly what you said. Well, you create the IP, then in a global market, somebody's going to come out and buy that IP unless you've got a method, unless you've got your, it's not a technology moat, it's a human capital moat. And unless you create a human capital moat, and no, I don't see anybody doing this yet, unless you create that human capital moat where people don't want to move and don't have to move, um, you're going to lose them. And
And so do you think it's just like people are just missing the narrative that are in the public, advising the politicians working in the bureaucracy, the politicians like whether it's the UK or Canada, they keep doubling down on venture capital, but then they don't think about the sovereignty of keeping the head offices in their country. And I can't figure out how so many smart people are missing something that seems so obvious.
well, I'm not sure why well, in a lot of cases, I don't know if this is a nice thing to say, but I'm not sure that they think things through
Yeah.
and consider the implications, the longer term implications. Because, for instance, we if you're it's a question of having the wrong incentives. So, because I've got a big bureaucracy, let's say, for instance, I'm an economic development person, and I can go out and I can create 10 centaurs or I can create 100 ponies, or I can attempt to create one unicorn. So it, the the media burst or the media uplift I get when I even get movement on the unicorn is better than the uplift that I get on the 100 centaurs. Oh, sorry. Yeah, evidently I ate the wrong thing this morning. So, um, so it's a question of outlifts and incentives. And it's a lot harder to deal with 100 ponies or whatever the number, a large number of ponies versus a single unicorn. So that's an attention thing. Unless you can actually create systems, and you see where I'm going with the policy issue, unless you can create systems that actually can maintain them and support itself and can evolve, it's too much for one person. And so if I'm getting paid, I only the less number of projects that I have to monitor is better for me, even though it's not really better for the economy. And so it's a matter of incentives, I would argue.
Yeah, I
Wrong,
agree. And how
misaligned
do we
incentives.
change? How do we get in front of the right people to affect those changes?
That's what I don't think. So, on terms of incentives and just looking at the evolution of our tax policy, it doesn't, companies aren't incentivized to sink more money into themselves for capital expenses. The big guys are. They've got the teams to apply for the SRED credits, to lobby government and have those teams to do that. And I agree with Eric. It's simpler to deal with less people and to know that a company will be able to create jobs and throwing a bunch of money at a foreign auto manufacturer to create an EV battery plant, for example.
Yeah.
I don't think that it is worth it or effective, worthwhile to try to create that change. I believe that it'd be more effective to democratize the tools needed for the small and medium businesses to grow, and which I'm insanely curious to hear those thoughts on. Who do you target at what TRL level to support them? Say if you've got a management and operating framework to be able to give them and say, for example, integrated stewardship. Here you go. And you've got an advisor, you've got an Eric and a Peter they can talk to scale and grow based on, as Eric aptly broke it down when I said it starts with an audit and showing that it's got to be a subscription service, consulting as a service, um, and then being able to bring the capital partners or be that capital partner to help them. But I'd say bring the capital partner to then show them that these companies are risk reduced or risk managed and are at this point to show that there's a framework, governance, risk management, operating framework to be able to help and scale them. And so to short circuit the process, to create trust within the lending partner, but policy, I don't think that where we're at and the way our government, regardless of the color, is going to be able to support these organizations to move fast enough and scale.
I don't think it's TRL. I think it's investor. It's IRL. Are you guys familiar with the IRL, investor readiness level?
No, not in detail.
I did a link to a Steve Blank post. And and I think that this, along with the rest of some of the stuff that you've talked about on is the organization ready? I think that's the piece. And if you're looking at, I like looking at it as a gardening metaphor or a bonsai metaphor, in which case you're evolving your system, you're not designing your system, and so you say, okay, this is my hypothesis, this is what I like, uh, and in venture studios with things like investor readiness levels, you're in a better position. You say, okay, this is what we want. We don't care about the technology. We care about whether the solution is good and people will pay for it and people are ready to buy it. Or what do we need to do to move them to being ready? Okay. And is that within our time frame, within our project runway? So investor readiness level, I think, does that better than a TRL, even though government is generally going to go for a TRL, but it's the wrong thing. It's, is this product ready?
So
And
so we're talking more scale up beyond a beta proof of concept, something that's been market that has market traction.
well, yeah, but it depends on how fast some things go. Like, let's talk fighters, multi-role fighters. Okay. So this would have been about 20 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer. I remember Saab coming, a statement out of Saab saying, well, yeah, we can build a new fighter in 5 years. Okay. And we can design, build, test, put it into the field from idea to delivery. That was a quarter of a century ago when they said that. And that was one of the things that led me to look at UAVs and those types of things over a decade ago and stuff like that. So it's not about the technology. Is the market ready? Are the people ready? Is the need there? And that's not a technology issue. That's a readiness of the market, the change, and sometimes that's with a beta. Like we've sold pre-release betas for licensing before, right? And you can do that, and you can show, and that's even better than investment, right? Because if I get a client that says, "Yeah, I love the idea. If you can do it, I'll buy." No, we did about a quarter of a million. Uh, we did a quarter of a million in licenses back in 1990, so that's probably worth what, 600, $800,000 today. Um, and that was without a beta. That was, yeah, we see a need. Do you agree there's a need? And they said, yeah, here's money, fill that need. We have reason to believe that you can do it. We like what you're saying. Show us. And this was many years ago. Same is true. We can still go out. We can still. Sorry, I've got beepings going on. We can still go out and we can do that, but it depends on how that procurement happens. And that's one of, like, I try not to be insulting on a bunch of my LinkedIn posts from a filtering point of view.
Don't we all?
But we, like 40 years ago now, when I started, our business model was 5 years. Our business cycle was 5 years for a software development. Well, even at that time, it changed too fast, and I think we went down to 6 months, and then it went up a little bit, and that type of stuff. Same has to happen in defense policy. We see what's happening in the Ukraine, and you can't have, oh yes, we have an advanced technology platform, and it's good for 60 years. Guys, we change our technology pretty fast.
Mhm.
That same platform is not going to be state of the art 40 years later, let alone 60 years later. But you're not willing to change your mindset into shrinking the decision loop into a much tighter framework. How do we get people to, like, that is something that we really need to change. And that doesn't matter whether it's defense or health. Health innovation in Canada, 17 years. What VC wants to do a 17-year investment in innovation? You're not going to want to. That's why we're held back. So even if you're like, I wouldn't invest oh yeah, it's a great idea, but I'm not going to invest in this jurisdiction
Mhm.
because I'm not going to wait 17 years to maybe get my money back,
And
right?
there's a
So
Mark.
So here's a question for you, Eric. Do you believe that do you believe that general scientists working in academia that do not identify as entrepreneurial founders, like want to be CTOs or CSOs, do you think they would give up the voting majority of the equity of their idea in exchange for liquidity on day two and income with the future of potentially, you know, being just as rich as going the entrepreneurial venture capital route? Like, do you think we could convince our scientific community to give up the ownership of their idea in exchange for publicly traded stock in a fund, um, that kind of thing? Like, what's your thought on that?
I'm there. I need to break it out. Okay. Do I think that you could get them to give it up? Yes. Do I think stock or publicly traded uh, tools are the right incentive? So yes, I think they would sell it, or I think they would give it up for the right incentive. Do I think stock is the right incentive? Probably not. Um,
Okay. What's the right incentive?
I suspect the right incentive is a combination of security and prestige,
Ah, interesting. Oh, that's good to know.
and not stock. Like too many times, I've had the conversation, and it's if it's stock, it's the stock of how stable is the stock. And let's face it, public companies aren't stable if you're unless you're what you have to be blue chip. You're basically over. You're definitely $10 per share plus. Okay, so you're not a junior.
Correct.
Okay, and any of the ideas that we're generally talking about are either picked up by um, they're either acquired by a major, or if they're done internally by a junior, then a lot of times the academics will not want to be participating in the junior because that's also different from what they desire from stability, rewards, and new innovation perspective. I personally think, and this is again, I feel like I'm harping on the venture studio side. Um, you familiar with hacking for defense?
No.
Okay. So really what that is problem orientated, user specific, bring the users in, focus on the problem, build a solution for that problem.
Right.
Okay? I suspect if you have a venture studio that really focuses on that, this is our problem. How can your technology, how can your research solve our problem in an effective way? And because it's probably not straight on, it's probably this is how we're doing it. But if we modify our research like this, then it works. And we know that that's a sociological perspective on diffusion of innovations, right? We know that that's the case. So that's also what's going to motivate, from my perspective, a lot of the academics I know is that's what's going to motivate them. So if you can show how you can make that happen so that they can use their research and their research goes from idea to social value faster, and I don't care whether it's economic or social or whatever, they care more about it made a difference. If you can make their research make a difference faster, that's what I think will get them to give up their IP or take a smaller piece of the pie. Now, that's different than what the universities really pursue.
So I just put the drawing in the notes there in the comments. So what I've been struggling with getting attention is this hypothesis of commercialization as a service. And so my thought is venture studios like accelerators and incubators still require an entrepreneur founder. And I've decided that Canada is not um, weighted on entrepreneurship. So my feeling is leave all that the way it is. That's certainly capturing a small part of our country. But to me, the real opportunity is connecting the scientists with the business community. And so I've kind of designed this hypothesis around commercialization as a service. And you can change whatever in this thinking. Like this isn't hard thinking. This is just a way to start. And my thought is once you've got the money, you're really going through this process of due diligence. And I think one of the things I'm trying to uncover in Canada is I don't think we have enough rigor or discipline around our due diligence, especially when public funding's involved. And so where that comes from is a guy that's a Hannes Bloom. He's a German that's very heavily connected in global venture capital that lives in Victoria. So I just happened to, meet him socially. And he said something to me that really stuck. He said, he talks to these Canadian startups all the time, and most of them don't realize that what they're working on is probably already being worked on in another country. And I thought
That's always the case.
it's interesting how little due diligence we do when public money's involved, whether it's through BDC, EDC, or nonprofits or crowns around this space. So that was kind of the first one. And then I see it as like a green light, red light, um, yellow light, and you kind of go through these steps, and eventually you come down to the bottom where you've got a commercialized product that's now part of a holding company. And the idea is we don't want to work with entrepreneurs. We want to work with scientists that don't identify it as entrepreneurs, but want to benefit. And what you said today is really valuable because I was thinking it was kind of saying, hey, we're going to still make sure you're rich, but we're going to do it a different way than the traditional tech transfer model. But when you said prestige and security, I thought, yeah, you're right. Actually, I missed that in my thinking. So that really helped. And then my thought is when you have a portfolio of Canadian commercialized companies, then you build an ethical and an investment wall so you can still do direct foreign investment, but you're saying to them, we'd love you to invest in Canada. And here's a fund that owns 1,000 Canadian tech companies at various levels, but you're not allowed to buy. We don't sell direct equity. And I know there's still a challenge with shareholder supremacy that I have to figure out. Somebody could just buy the whole thing and sell off all the companies. So there is some legal pieces, which is like you said, the co-op model and various models that I still have to think about. But to me, the Canadian solution for economic sovereignty is permanent capital using a venture builder and basically saying we're going to capture the other 90% of the economy by leveraging the business community and the scientific community through this venture builder. So don't hold back, like beat the shit out of this idea. Tell me why it won't work. I'm fully open to criticism.
Okay, um, size of the JPEG's a little bit of a having a bit of a problem reading it as I blow it up enough so that I can
Okay.
actually see it. But what I think I see is donor advised.
Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, don't worry about the details. It's more the kind of bigger picture of this idea of a venture builder. I can email it to you.
Okay, Uh, in general, the complexity of the steps. So, for instance, flow through shares. Right now, we only get flow through shares on mining. I like the idea of flow through shares, but it requires
Sorry,
other.
what's your email, Eric?
Here, let me just.
I thought I had it. Yeah, and again, those are just I'm just putting them there as I get feedback from people. Um, again,
So,
it's just a hypothesis, of course.
love the idea of flow through shares, but that's a lobbying issue. If you have a fund, I think a fund is a good way to do it. Um, then the next step is um, from the entrepreneur's point of view, like how many times or how many things are you attempting to replicate? Like if so, for instance, you have the researcher, how many, let's say you want to create 1,000 companies or you want to create 3 companies per year, okay, or 5 companies per year, let's say. Uh, so you need management, or you need to be able to train management for those 5 companies using best practices and being able to replicate those quickly. And that's where the entrepreneurs come in, because you're not going to get that from the academics, and you're not going to get that from the existing businesses. So it's a question of maturing your human resource capital. And you can use a venture studio model for that. So that's where your entrepreneurs still fit in. Now, I would say, we lack a lot of rigor in Canada. I agree, and that's whether you're looking for public money or a number of the entrepreneurs that I talk to, the lack of rigor that they go through in when they put something forward, is frustrating. And that's why I was pretty happy when I came across the investor readiness level, because people need to understand, well, okay, well, you're not giving me money. Well, you're not ready to take the money. But that's an educational piece. And we don't educate people, whether they're academics or business people or whatever they are. We don't really educate them very well on, yeah, you want the money? We have the money, but we're not giving you the money until you reach this level. You reach that level and you've shown that you can make us money, we're happy. We're not in it for, we're in it as an investment. And sure, we're happy to give a handout, but we're not giving handouts. We're giving hand ups, or we're giving investments. Okay. Um, Need to have early stage funding for
I
innovation.
think that makes sense. Having those milestone injections or payments, just like you would in construction financing, is release the funds as the risk is reduced along as they progress.
And I will also comment on what and I don't understand this piece. I'm very much results orientated, in that these are the outcomes we want to see. Did we make the outcomes? Why not? Okay. So, in a lot of cases, our due diligence is not outcome based. And yeah, okay, I'll say this. So, I have a CEO. Or a CFO, and he did a lot of work for large investment and on large due diligence. Like I think he did about $500 million of it, investments. And we got talking about his due diligence practice. And this is, I don't know, I don't know. Aimco, I think, is worth about 160 billion. uh, and and their processes at Aimco were very much not not results oriented, not outcomes oriented. And that's the same thing that I get when I've talked to people who work public companies, both out of Delaware and Florida and a few other places. Well, it's about making the sale as about demonstrating the data that shows that we're making progress. So if we have better outcomes and better tracking of outcomes, I think that is key to be able to showing instead of being really good at making justifications, which is a lot of times what we seem to be doing. But that
Because
was
those outcomes are what's being sought by a potential investor or capital partner is revenue, which is often how many sales, what's the revenue, what's that trend, what's lifetime value, what metric would you use for that outcome? How do you measure success? That's agnostic industry or yeah,
I
industry.
like speed to revenue. How long did it take me to get to 500,000 in revenue? Because there's a huge difference between 6 months to 500,000 per year and 3 years or 12 years to 500,000 a year. Right? So it's the same dollar value, but the speed that it took me to get there also matters.
Hmm.
And of course, then as you get bigger, you go, okay, yeah, now I'm making 5 million a year, or I'm making 50 million a year. That tells me a lot about what the company is like. And then of course I look at profitability.
So when you read this note from Peter Cowan, he's the CEO of Innovate BC, but he's also a IP strategist and friends with Jim Baselli. He was the founder of IPON in Ontario. So
Okay.
he says you need to have early stage government funding for innovation IP and R&D, or Canadian VC funding like NBC have a clause that requires either a payback for IP or licensing right of non-infringements back to Canadian headquarter companies. Sorry, you guys can read it. I don't know why I'm reading.
Yeah.
And so the question I'm trying to get out of him is if the company is using venture capital to move forward and it's sold to a US company to get the exit, the early exit, does the IP have any chance in being retained in Canada? And I'm trying to kind of draw this link between publicly funded venture capital, which is actually the largest venture capital outlay in Canada, is BDC and EDC versus private. So why are we putting all this energy into IP if we're just losing our technology? And I think if I'm reading it right, the answer is we're 50 years behind the US and we need to do all these things. And this is their strategy to get us to evolve to where we actually have a VC, a competitive VC. So, do you guys have any thought on that? And then I'll explain why I put the link there after.
I I disagree with that premise. Number one, I disagree with we are 50 years behind and we're a smaller market.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're
You disagree
foolish.
with Peter's, you disagree with Peter's premise?
I disagree with Peter's premise that we need VC, that we should be focusing on VC funding
Yeah,
because we're playing a losing game.
correct. I agree.
Okay. What we want to do is, if we're 50 years behind, we have to leapfrog. Okay.
Correct.
So
I
that means
agree.
we need a different approach. Just doing the same thing and saying, well, they did it, so we should do it. Well, you're always going to be behind. Okay. And
Mhm.
now I also recognize, and we all have, I think, talked about there are problems with the VC model.
Well, it's not competitive. Okay,
That's
so
that's that's one of it's non-competitive. The efficiency is not very good. It's not producing the right stuff, and you need a really big mass of money. We
yeah,
are never going to compete against the United States massive money. So do
So
it in a different way. You have to do it in a 50, you have to do it in a smaller, more agile way, which means that you actually don't want government VCs.
yeah.
And I would argue you actually don't want VCs, you want a different model.
Okay,
I
so
agree.
why are we doubling down on the entrepreneurship VC model? What am I missing in the
Change,
hmm?
change.
Okay.
It's right back
So
to I don't know what to do, but I got to do something because that's what
right,
I get paid for.
That's
right.
it. That's what I
So,
think is happening. It's a
so
bigger
we
hammer.
truly need to figure out how to get at the highest level of government to have this conversation because we're fighting ourselves. Okay, so here's two other interesting
I,
things.
Well,
I need to put a comment in.
I
Sorry.
do have another call in 5 minutes, but I just want to add to that delta, that 50-year delta with the States. The US is a bigger market. The culture and risk appetite's different. And because of several factors, the taxation, and many other reasons, Canada, I think it's we're using a bigger hammer, hoping for different results, and it won't happen. I really don't see leaning into government to get the solution because they have the bright minds in the Department of Finance and Industry Canada looking at this data and what needs to be done and exploring other models. And the decisions at the political level at the end of the day look to how do you get results in 3 years so we can announce it before the term's over and get elected again. And you can do that again with that auto manufacturer and showing the results of the billions put into that community investment, the jobs created, and
Yeah, their incentive is to create jobs.
yeah. So yeah, I just want to share that. I think that's we have to do things differently because our culture is more we're fatter in the middle as opposed to the extremities in the US where that 1% is fatter. There's no ceiling for where anyone can go. In Canada, it is limited. And just like Eric said about security and prestige, that's a really important consideration to make in terms of what people are after. It's the same thing for everybody. I think culturally for us is how do people create that security and prestige, and our values are more inclusive as opposed to competitive. So I just wanted to share that before you share what you were going to say, Peter.
No, go ahead, Eric. You had a comment.
Um, Actually, no, I think I lost it.
Okay, so I'll give you two
Yeah.
stories. So one of them is if you look at Mavericks, you look at who's on the team, I'm not I haven't convinced myself that these guys aren't being nefarious with Canadian Innovation Council. So my feeling is, and I haven't been able to have a direct conversation with either Raffaello or Baselli, but I'm wondering if these guys, because they are Series B venture capitalists, their whole motivation for Canadian Council is to get Canadian companies to the Maverick level of investment. And that's okay until they start talking about economic sovereignty. And then I call bullshit. So I'd love to debate this with these guys publicly because I think what they're doing is they're basically whitewashing the whole thing for their own benefit. And then the other one is a Lula. So a Lula is the perfect kind of case study. I don't know how easy it would be to replicate, but the perfect case study of commercialization. And what happened was, so the guy's a polymath. He's got the Midas touch. He's got multiple massive companies under his belt. He rented lab space at UVic, started playing with fabric because he was a kiteboarder, and
Mhm.
all the scientists started poking around asking him what he was doing. Next thing you know, he's got them all involved, and they took the product like within less than a year to the state it's at now, both the fabric and the glue, and they pushed a CPC, which is the Canadian version of a SPAC. They used that with another guy that's very successful, the university, like the business school's named after him. They connected, put this SPAC together, and went public. So, like within 24 months, these guys went from an idea to a publicly traded Canadian company. And I thought, okay, there's your gap analysis when you want to start comparing what's possible. And again, I fully understand that the guy's, unique. He is, it's
But
not
then the
every,
answer is to get him so that he's not unique.
yeah,
Most of these things are not talent based, they're not genetically based.
yeah,
They're based on education, knowledge, and training. Okay, so that can be replicated. But if our rigor is insufficient, that means that we're not replicating it, and we're not replicating it fast enough. So if we're going to, and just coming back to the smaller amount of money, how do you compete against a larger group
yeah,
when you have smaller resources? Well, that means that you have to be more focused, and you have to have quicker decision loops, and you have
yeah,
to use their big piece against them, so that you can, even if it's not against them, you have to use it to your benefit. So
yeah,
that's not government. So the place here is venture fund, is a fund that does a venture studio that replicates what you just said with the fabric, and creates not one-offs, but creates 5, 10, 20 of those companies. And that develops your network. And if you have that network, which is inclusive, and the money is there and the resources are there so that people can get the what motivates them, they're not going to want to leave, and they're not going to want to sell it, right?
Yeah, and this is this is amazing. But I have to stop here. Can we pick up exactly here? And I made a note to for us to kick off next week, but this is really, really meaningful. I'm going to look into Lula and just at how they went in 24 months from concept to publicly traded. Thanks, guys. This is
And but I do want to add, there are ways that I think are faster than and more effective than the venture capital approach.
okay.
say that again.
I think there are better ways than trying to duplicate the American venture capital approach.
Yeah,
Learn
correct,
from them, take what is appropriate for us, and leapfrog. That's what we need to be doing,
correct.
not just trying to duplicate what they've already done.
So it's interesting. So I've been talking to like high net worth venture capital private family offices in Calgary, and
Yeah.
it's interesting. Like people are so stuck in that model, and it's actually quite fun to kind of say, well, here's an example and here's another example, and the change is really interesting. But
But
I
we need to
think,
be able to prove it.
yeah, and I think, well, I can prove it because there's a guy doing it in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's interesting, how hard it is for that aha moment. Because, like you said, we've got a leapfrog, and I kind of came up with that like a year ago where I was like, this is crazy. Like, Canada has all the pieces to build the recipe to leapfrog, but as long as we keep trying to copy something, and then when I see that note from Peter, I kind of see why. Like, he's not answering my question. He's just giving me more verbiage, and it's
Yep.
like it's like he's trying to make it complicated, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's really interesting.
Okay. I gotta I'm
Okay,
late.
we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Have a
guys.
good week, guys.
Yeah, take care.